Delimitation and the South. The Constitution mandates delimitation after every census, but the number of seats in Parliament and the share of each state has remained static since 1976. This is largely due to opposition from southern states. Union Home Minister Amit Shah on Wednesday said southern states would not lose even a single seat after delimitation, addressing long held apprehensions of states such as Tamil Nadu and Kerala about losing representation in parliament if delimitation was to be carried out based on the latest population data. Largely due to divergent economic trajectories of the two regions, population growth in South India has been far slower than in North. Thus, if delimitation were to take place based on the latest population data, northern states would receive much larger number of seats in the parliament compared to the South. Delimitation is a constitutional mandate to be carried out after every census in order to readjust the number of seats in parliament and the boundaries of constituencies based on the latest population data. The idea is to ensure that each constituency has roughly the same number of people living in it up until 1976 if after every Indian census the seats of Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha and state legislative assemblies were redistributed throughout the country. This happened thrice 1951, 61 and 71. The 42nd Amendment to the Constitution, passed during the emergency, froze the total number of parliamentary and state assembly seats till the 2001 census. This was done so that states with higher rates of population growth could implement family planning measures without losing representation in parliament. In 2001, the boundaries of constituencies were altered, but the number of seats in that each state had in Lok Sabha, as well as strength of states' legislative assemblies remained the same. This was largely due to opposition from southern states. Why are southern states nervous about delimitation? States in peninsular India feel that delimitation based on latest population data will reduce their representation in parliament. Delimitation is a constitutional mandate to be carried out after every census in order to readjust the number of seats in parliament and the boundaries of constituencies based on the latest population data. So, regional parties from the south feel that delimitation based on population could skew elections in favor of parties such as the incumbent BJP with a base in the north. Congress too shares this anxiety following the rise of BJP through the late 1980s and early 1990s on the back of the Ram Temple movement and the arrival of social justice parties following the Mandal movement. Congress has been doing poorly in the Hindi heartland from winning 51 seats in UP, including Uttarakhand, and 30 seats in Bihar, including Jharkhand, its tally fell to only 6. Population-wide seat ratio was broadly equitable after last delimitation. 1971's population was 8 crore 38 8.3 crore. Population to seat ratio was 9.8 lakh, 7.8 lakh, 10.3 lakh, and on similar lines. Based on projected there is however no restriction what this base average should be. If 10.11 lakh average were to be retained, the strength of Lok Sabha would shoot up nearly 1400 based on Union Health Ministry's population for 2025. This would also mean that UP, including Uttarakhand, would end up nearly tripling the seats it has in Lok Sabha from 85 to 250. The percentage rise would be even greater for Bihar, including Jharkhand, which would see its tally rise from 25 to 82. But Tamil Nadu's share would increase from 39 to 76, while Kerala's tally would rise from 20 to 36. Since the new parliament has only 888 seats, this formula is unlikely to be retained. If the population of each constituency were to be kept at 20 lakhs, parliament would have 707 seats compared to 543 at present. Southern states would still be a significant disadvantage. Tamil Nadu would neither gain or lose seats, while Kerala would lose two. But UP would now have 126 seats, while Bihar would have 85. Even if average per constituency population were to be kept at 15 lakh, Tamil Nadu and Kerala would see modest increase to their tally to 52 and 24 respectively, while the tallies of UP and Bihar would rise to 768 and 114. What are gharials? Gavalis gangetes is a long-snouted fish-eating crocodilian. The name gharial comes from Hindi word ghada or meant pot or vessel, referring to the bulbous snout tip of the adult males, which resembles the inverted pot. Gharials are sacred in Indian mythology, often depicting the divine mount of the goddess Ganga. Their slender snouts, lined with numerous sharp, interlocking teeth, are adapted to trap fish, the mainstay of their diet. Males grow from 3 to 6 meters and female 2.6 to 4.5 meters. Gharials mate in the winter, November to January. Sandbanks and islands are critical to their ecology, serving as preferred sites for basking and nesting. Between March to May, as river levels recede, female gharials climb onto exposed sandbanks and islands to nest community. Many lay their eggs in the same area. Females provide parental care for the first few days after hatching. Gharials play an important role in rivers ecosystem by cleaning up carrion the decaying flesh of dead animals. Sandbanks and islands are critical to their ecology, serving as preferred sites for basking and nesting. Chief Minister Yadav released 10 gharials, 9 male and 1 female, in the river Chambal on February 17. To bolster the population of gharial in the state, Madhya Pradesh boasts of the highest number of gharials in India, with 2024 census recording 2000 2,400 individuals in the Chambal sanctuary alone. This is a feat attributed to decades of conservation work following a national decline of more than 80% in the gharial population between 1950s and 1960s. According to state wildlife officials, globally gharial population saw a steady recovery until 1997, but between 1997 and 2006, numbers plummeted by 58%. Wildlife researchers have said the species is likely extinct in Myanmar and Bhutan, with only small, uncertain populations remaining in Pakistan, Nepal, and Bangladesh upper Brahmaputra. Historically, the gharial's population has declined due to overhunting. They are prized for their skin, eggs, and as trophies. Today, dam construction, irrigation canals, siltation, river course changes, And embankments, sand mining, pollution, fishing are some of the threats that gharials face. Gill nets, in particular, kill gharials of all sizes, even in protected areas. Between 1975 and 1982, India established 16 captive breeding and release centers and 5 gharial sanctuaries. The species survive primarily five refuges: National Chambal Sanctuary, Katania Ghat Sanctuary, Chitwan National Park, Son River Sanctuary, and Satkoshia Gorge Sanctuary. Conservation efforts include captive breeding programs to rear and release hatchlings back in the river, monitoring populations, actively managing threats such as sand mining. Threats: historically, gharial population has been declined due to overhunting prized for their skin, eggs, and trophies. Today, dam construction, irrigation, canal siltation, river course changes, embankments, sand mining, etc. are the threats they are facing. Five refuges: National Chambal Sanctuary, Katarnia Ghat Sanctuary, Chitwan National Park, Son River 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 Sanctuary, and Satkoshia Gorge Sanctuary. Conservation efforts include captive breeding programs to rear and release hatchlings, actively managing threats such as sand mining. States in peninsular India feel that delimitation based on latest population data will reduce their representation in parliament and thus diminish their political heft. In September 23, during the debate in parliament on the Women's Reservation Bill, whose implementation is linked to the delimitation process, DMK leader Kanimozi read out a statement from Tamil Nadu Chief Minister Stalin. It said if delimitation is going to be on population census, it will deprive and reduce the representation of South Indian states. There is fear in the minds of people of Tamil Nadu that our voices will be undermined. Supporting Kanimozi, TMC MP Mahua Moitra said, according to data, we will have a 0% increase in the number of seats for Kerala, only a 26% for Tamil Nadu, but a whooping 79% for MP and UP. In October last year, expressing concern over an aging population in his state, Andhra Pradesh CM N. Chandrababu Naidu announced his government was contemplating legislation to incentivize families to have more children. Days later, Stalin, referring to a potential reduction of South India's share of seats in parliament due to lower population rates, joked, why not aim for 16 children? Notably, in July 16 last year, the Sangh Parivar too had flagged that low birth rates in western and southern India had placed these regions at a disadvantage. RSS affiliate magazine organizer had said in an editorial, regional imbalance is another critical dimension that will impact the delimitation process of parliamentary constituencies in the future. The states from the west and south are doing relatively better regarding population control measures and therefore fear losing a few seats in the parliament if base population is changed after every census. The number of seats each state gets after delimitation will depend upon the base average population the Delimitation Commission, as and when constituted, will arrive at. In the 1977 Lok Sabha, for instance, every MP in India represented 10.11 lakh people on average. While it is impossible for every constituency to have the same population, it is desirable that population in each constituency be tightly grouped around this average. There is, however, no restriction on what this base average should be. If 10.11 lakh average be retained, the Lok Sabha would seat strength of Lok Sabha would shoot up to 1400. Regional parties from the south feel that delimitation based on population could slew elections in favor of parties such as incumbent BJP, with a base in the north, and Congress too shares this anxiety. Following the rise of the BJP through late 1980s and early 1990s on the back of Ram Temple movement and the arrival of social justice parties, following the Mandal movement, Congress has been doing poorly in Hindi heartland, from winning 51 seats in UP, including Uttarakhand, and 30 seats in Bihar. Its tally fell to only 6 and 5 in two erstwhile states respectively. This at a time when party has 99 seats in parliament. Congress has in total 153 seats in Karnataka, Maharashtra, Kerala, Telangana and Tamil Nadu alone. In fact, of the 232 seats won by the India bloc in 2024, polls a little over 100 came from more populous northern states. Of the 52 seats won by the Congress in 2019, 15 came from Kerala and 8 from Tamil Nadu. Even in 2004, when it had won 145 seats, a majority of its victories had come from South India. What to know about NASA's Space Telescope? NASA will launch a new space telescope on Friday on a 2-year mission to help better understand the formation of universe, the growth of all galaxies across cosmic history, and the location of water and life forming molecules in the Milky Way. Here are three things about Special Observatory Spectrophotometer for the History of the Universe, Epoch of Reionization, and Ice Explorer. SphereX Spectrophotometer for the History of the Universe, Epoch of Reionization, and ICES Explorer Spectrophotometer for the History of the Universe, Epoch of Reorganization, and ICES Explorer. SphereX will map the universe in all kinds of two kinds of cosmic light, optical and infrared. The human eye can see optical light, but infrared is visible to it. To study infrared, which contains information about the farthest reaches of space, the birth of stars, and details of galactic structures, scientists use specialized cameras and telescope as the James Webb Telescope. While the James Webb Telescope is great at observing localized regions of the universe, SphereX will image the entire sky as seen from the Earth. Nikki Fox, Associate Administrator for NASA's Science Mission Directorate, told Space.com, "We are literally mapping the entire celestial sky in 102 infrared colors for the first time in humanity's history, and we will see that every 6 months. SphereX will map the universe in two kinds of cosmic light. SphereX will map the universe in two kinds of cosmic light, optical and infrared. The human eye can see optical light, but infrared is invisible to it. To study infrared, which contains information about farthest reaches of the space, the birth of stars, scientists use specialized cameras and telescopes such as James Webb Telescope. While the James Webb Telescope is great at observing localized regions in the universe, the SphereX will image the entire sky as seen from the Earth. One of the primary aims of SphereX is to measure something called cosmic inflation. This refers to a period around 14 billion years ago when the universe expanded faster than the speed of light for a fraction of a second. Scientists believe that inflation explains aspects of the universe such as flatness or lack of curvature on the large scales. Cosmic inflation remains poorly understood. SphereX will provide spectroscopic images to measure 3D positions of about 450 million galaxies across cosmic history, which will allow scientists to create a picture of the cosmos in both positions and time. SphereX, SphereX will identify water and life forming molecules, also known as biogenic molecules such as carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in the Milky Way galaxy, where Earth is located. These molecules are frozen in icy particles located in some of the coldest parts of the galaxy. For life to form on Earth, the biogenic molecules would have somehow traveled from these regions to our planet. Exactly how this happened is not known yet. The new telescope will provide a complete consensus of biogenic molecules in both Milky Way and nearby systems. We can determine the necessary conditions to form biogenic molecules in space. In this turn, this can tell us about crucial step in how the life can be. How Trump's gold card US visa could work, what concerns it raises. President Donald Trump has announced a visa program called Gold Card for foreign investors seeking permanent residency in the United States, ultimately American citizenship. We are going to be selling a gold card, Trump said on Tuesday. We are going to be putting a price on that card of about $5 million. It's going to give you a green card privilege, plus it's going to be a route to American citizenship and wealthy people coming into our country by buying this card. The scheme, details of which would be known in 2 weeks, would replace the EB5 Immigrant Investor Visa Program. Immigrant Investor Visa Program, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said the EB5 program was full of nonsense, the make believe and fraud, and it was way to green card that was low price. The EB5 program, created by Congress in 1990 and administered by the US Citizenship and Immigration Service, grants permanent residency green card to foreigners who invest in American businesses. Investors must put at least $1 million and create at least 10 jobs for Americans. $1 million and create at least 10 jobs for Americans. While details are not known yet, it appears that Gold Card would not require to invest in American businesses or the creation of new employment. It could simply be a direct purchase of green card by paying a flat fee of $5 million to the US government. It appears likely that USCIS will administer and regulate the issuance of gold card as well. US Citizenship and Immigration Services CIS will likely work with the Department of State and Department of Commerce to administer the investment side of the scheme. It appears that the USCIS will administer and regulate the issuance of gold card, and it could be argued that the clear and simple route to residency offered by the scheme will bring high, high net worth individuals to America, whose investments will stimulate the US economy. High net worth immigrants often invest in real estate, luxury markets, and businesses. As Lutnick has pointed out, the EB5 program has been accused of facilitating fraud, and a simple high cost purchase model could reduce or eliminate such risk. While the Gold Card scheme throws up several ethical, legal, and political concerns, the program could be seen as putting American citizenship on sale, favoring money over merit, catering to the rich at the expense perhaps of talented professionals. Immigration programs with an investment component can be vulnerable in the absence of strong regulatory checks to possible money laundering and undue foreign influence. Trump was nonchalant when asked whether the program might open America's door to Russian oligarchs. Yeah, possibly. Hey, I know some Russian oligarchs that are very nice people. If the gold card comes without a requirement to invest in jobs creating enterprises, passive investors could gain residence in the US with no contribution to its economy. The, city, the central questions remain whether US citizenship is to be put on sale and whether US immigration policy should privilege skills, contributions, and diversity. A similar program in Canada, albeit with a much smaller investment amount, was shut down after rampant misuse. In Congress, any significant change to immigration policy must be approved by Congress. The Republican Party currently has a majority in both houses. However, not all Republicans may want to be accused of selling American citizenship. Democrats will certainly oppose the proposal. In courts, most legal challenges in visa programs originate from the administration of the program rather than program itself. It's too early to guess what the legal challenges Trump's gold card may face. In the 2023 financial year, only 631 Indians obtained US green cards through the EB-5 programs using consular processing. Given the small number for a scheme where investment required only about $1 million, it seems unlikely that idea of buying green card for 5 times that sum, more than 43 crore for the current exchange rate, will appear attractive to many Indians. Bringing on Binging on junk food can alter brain activity. To better understand the effects of insulin on the brain, researchers recruited 29 healthy male volunteers. 18 of them were put on a high calorie diet for 5 days. Their diet comprised 1500 calorie packs of high fat, high sugar foods. The researchers imaged blood flow in particular in the participant's brain as a proxy for brain activity. Imaging was performed before 5-day period, immediately after it 1 week later. The researchers found that just 5 days of indulgence, men's brains show higher activity in brain regions that respond to food rewards and dietary changes. This means that brain response to insulin can adapt to short-term changes in diet before weight gain and may facilitate the development of obesity and associated challenges. After we eat something, our body releases insulin to help us break down the food. After we eat something, our body releases insulin to help break down the food. Some chemical reaches our brain to dampen our appetite. In people with obesity, the brain response to insulin becomes weaker, which affects how body processes food. History, identity, sambar. When it comes to food, there is no such thing as an origin story. If internet theorists are to be believed, centuries before he became the subject of hit film. Samaji is said to have inspired another creation, which became a blockbuster of whole new level. Chhawa, a historical film based on the life of emperor and starring Vicky Kaushal. At present, it is both the highest grossing film. And then there is Sambar, that tangy, spicy vegetable and lentil stew, believed to many have created in the royal kitchens of Thanjavur in the 17th century, when the region was part of the vast Maratha Empire. Historians in Tamil Nadu has rubbished the origin story, pointing to the descriptions of stews or soups very much like the modern sambar, predate the Maratha presence in the region by at least a couple of hundred years. But the Sambar theory endures. After all, everyone loves a good story, and there's something very charming about the thought of young royal pinning for a food that he's grown up eating. Or was it? There's no actual evidence to back the story. And how about Gujarati Sambaro, a stir-fried vegetable dish, almost a warm salad typically made of cabbage. This just to be clear, has nothing to do with Persi Sambar Masala. What is really interesting about his whole historical morass is that origin of sambar is today, by today's standards of authenticity, a tyrannical disruptive that is good for nothing except guaranteeing some SEO hits. Almost none of the ancient Tamil recipes would fit the bill either. Most of them miss the key ingredient here and there. Tur dal, for example, shows up only in the 13th century, much after the earliest mention of sambar like tangy stews back to the Sangam period. Food is and always been a battleground where history clashes with identity and community pride. Many beloved dishes, whether it's hummus, whose owner Lebanon famously took Israel to court in 2008, or four over which China and Vietnam stake a claim, have disputed origins. If there is anything remarkable about sambar, it is the breadth of history that is contained within one hot aromatic bowl with tomatoes and chilies that traveled all the way from South America to India via Portuguese, esfitoda that came from Central Asia, and other ingredients from near and far. Sambar offers a quick snapshot of centuries. This refers to the editorial in the Mirror of UN, the US decision to vote against the Ukraine's UN resolution calling for de-escalation and cessation of hostilities marks a significant shift, prioritizing geopolitical interest over traditional alliances, reducing involvement in global conflicts, pressuring Ukraine into negotiations that align with American objectives, and consolidating resources to counter China's growing influence may have prompted his administration to soften its stance towards Russia. This move also vindicates India's posture of strategic neutrality. This refers to the report "Brutal Reprehensible" court hands Sanjan Kumar life term in another anti-Sikh riots case. Sanjan Kumar's conviction in his role of 1984 anti-Sikh riots may bring some sense of justice to the victims and their families, but the fact that it took for 4 decades speak volumes for about the inefficiency and delays within our judicial system. If we are to prevent this from happening again, reforms must be made to ensure quicker trials and better protection for victims. All is not lost. This refers to the report Delhi lost 2000 crore due to excise policy. The AAP has already experienced a major setback with a humbling defeat in a national capital. The CAG's reports adds only insult to injury and may dim the prospects of party in the long run. With corruption charges against its bigwigs, the party seems to have lost its founding USP of anti-corruption politics. Yet all is not lost. The party ought to revisit its policies. It can surely stage a turnaround provided it recenter in its original motto. This refers to the editorial "The New Right". It is futile to deplore voters' wisdom without addressing the factors driving the far right's rise, many lamenting this trend that voters who once valued liberalism are now reacting to issues like brooding gangs in the UK, the transformation of Sweden and Germany due to unchecked immigration, and attacks on free speech in France. Far right movements exploit this discontent, expecting liberalism to thrive amid state action. Fostering the influx of contradictory ideals is unrealistic. It is futile to deplore voters' wisdom without addressing the factors driving the far right's rise. Many lamenting this trend overlook that voters who once valued liberalism are now reacting to issues like brooding gangs in the UK, transformation of Sweden and Germany due to unchecked immigration, and attacks on free speech in France. Far right movements exploit this discontent, expecting liberalism to thrive and state actions. Fostering the influx of contradictory ideals is unrealistic. The power of the new nuclear. India's project to enhance the use of nuclear energy was long overdue. It will require innovations and leveraging the country's market strength. At long last, the government seems to have awakened to the inevitable role of nuclear energy in the realization of Viksit Bharat, setting up 100 gigawatt electric of nuclear capacity by 2047 may seem like a tall order, especially with little clarity on how it will be accomplished, yet it is a minimum mission statement for a long road to Viksit Bharat. Let us examine this further. Running a 100 gigawatt electric nuclear capacity would need 118,000 tons of mined uranium annually. This corresponds to a third of the world's uranium production today. Clearly, access to so much uranium is not possible. The situation gets exacerbated by the fact that India's nuclear generation capacity needs to be expanded by an order of magnitude. The only way out is then to start recycling uranium and, most importantly, thorium. This would bring down the need for mined uranium by an order of magnitude, maybe two. We would have to be in this mode by the time we can reach around 25 gigawatt nuclear generation capacity. Since by then nuclear uranium requirements in the present mode would reach around 8 to 10% of the current global uranium production, and access to uranium will become difficult. That day is around 10 years away. Going by the current projections, recycled nuclear fuel would then be necessary to sustain the capacity addition growth rate. We have already closed the nuclear fuel cycle and produced enough MOX fuel for recycling in the 500 megawatt prototype fast breeder reactor, the next frontier for power generation capacity growth. The large-scale deployment of these reactors would that would use recycled fuel and breed much more, however, is still eluding us. While this remains important and we need to catch up as soon as possible, we need quick solution to tide over the impending slowdown in nuclear capacity addition rate. On account of fuel supply constraints, we face similar situation earlier that was resolved through opening of international civil nuclear cooperation. This gave us access to global uranium markets. Such a solution would lie in looking at fuel cycle options rather than reactor options. Thorium, which has been a long-standing hope for India's true energy security, can be irradiated along with high-savvy low-enriched uranium, high, high-assay low-enriched uranium in pressurized heavy water reactors at scale. The used fuel that would arise can be recycled to set up additional power generation capacity, including through molten salt reactors, which would be necessary in the third stage of our nuclear development. Anyway, rather than wasting time running behind foreign vendors pursuing their own interest, disregarding India's true needs, we should set our technological goals and leverage our market strength to mobilize domestic and foreign capabilities to achieve them. While recycling spent uranium fuel along with plutonium in fast reactors remains a superior option. Recycling high assay, low enriched uranium thorium fuel is the next best alternative. It would allow the program to grow as long as the irradiated fuel feed is available. Additionally, we will move closer to our long-term objectives while overcoming the fuel supply constraints that is bound to arise. Thorium, apart from its energy value, has some unprecedented advantages. These come with significant economic gains, particularly in pressurized heavy water reactors. The operation and safety performance of the reactors improve, and in addition to savings in mined uranium, the quality of benefits bundles needed and later managed reduces drastically. Most importantly, the fuel cycle becomes proliferation resistance, virtually eliminating the security related risk related to diversion by malevolent elements. High SA low enriched uranium thorium fuel bundles are of the same external geometry and can be deployed without any significant change in the reactor design. Most importantly, accumulated spent fuel becomes a feed for fueling thorium uranium molten salt reactors. Thorium uranium molten salt reactors. Such reactors and the necessary fuel cycle technology should be developed and deployed on priority. Going forward, one could integrate spallation neutron sources such in such MSRs, enabling the growth objectives that had necessitated fast breeder reactors. The plans to establish Bharat Small Reactors is an innovative public-private partnership are indeed welcome, along with 700 megawatt electric pressurized heavy water reactors which must form the main workhorse for capacity addition. Bharat Small Reactors could play a supportive role. High SA lower enriched uranium thorium fuel can be leveraged to enable the continuation of capacity addition beyond the time uranium supply constraints sets in. Despite delays in fast breeder reactor programs, small modular reactors are a new craze in the nuclear industry, but India already possesses a large experience in the small reactor category through its commercially successful and robust 220 megawatt electric pressurized heavy water reactors. In contrast, no SMR product has yet been deployed in numbers. A sizable order book is a prerequisite for SMR business. Having said that, there are a number of retiring coal plants sites that could be leveraged provided the design of the reactors is safe and that there would be no anxiety about evacuation in case of accidents. Moreover, most of the sites would not have space for an exclusion radius. India should thus consider only such SMRs that can meet these criteria. Most of the sites would not have space for an exclusion radius. India should consider only SMRs that meet these criteria and are fully manufactured in India to remain economically competitive. The AHWR 300 LEU, which was fully developed, met such criteria along with the use of thorium. Unfortunately, that has not been pursued. It is well worth recognizing that most of what is stated above would necessarily mean delivery by our laboratories like Bhabha Atomic Research Center IGCAR that needs to be ensured. The private sector, while it needs to be mobilized to scale up the program, has been best has at best a secondary role. The reverse would cause irreversible damage. In place of a post-Second World War order, Mr. Trump envisages a world where alliances are no more than empty words and great power bluffs and bully their way through. Charge of the Right Brigade, liberal international order may be facing irreversible structural decline, but there may not be enduring global alliance of the right. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer, things fall apart, the center cannot hold, mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. William Butler Yeats' words seem to resonate with the breathtaking pace of development last week that heralded the rise of new era of politics. It is stated with US Vice President JD Vance crossing the diplomatic red line by commenting on the domestic affairs of the European allies in Munich. Vance criticized European governments for ignoring those with contradictory political views regarding immigration, a veiled reference to the German far-right party Alternative for Germany. It came on the heels of Elon Musk publicly supporting the AfD. This was followed by a phone call between US President Trump and Russian President Putin, where two effectively decided to sacrifice Ukraine and sidestep Europe to cut a deal, burying in one fell swoop 75 years of transatlantic consensus on security symbolized by NATO. As European leaders have historically been the one sides ones sidestepping others when it has come to foreign policy, Africa says hello, they panicked and rushed to Paris to discuss an alternate European security framework. Simultaneously, UK's Prime Minister Keir Starmer and French President Macron plan to rush trips to Washington to persuade Trump Meanwhile, in the recent German elections, the conservative CSU-CDU returned to power with the far-right AfD close to second. Amidst all this, Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni criticized the left for its hysteria over the rise of conservative politicians worldwide. So there is an actual resurgence of the right. What does this mean for the future of international politics? And the first step is to understand the nature of this politics. The traditional left right binary doesn't add much to our understanding as it heaps all kinds of politics together. The left with the liberal conservative with the neo-nationalist. It may be more accurate to characterize post-World War II politics in the Western Europe as status quoist, characterized by bipartisan consensus on the free market economy, electoral democracy, and the acceptance of US hegemony and security umbrella under NATO. There were, of course, major differences on issues as well as welfare state, culture, and immigration. But by and large, normal politics meant playing by certain rules no matter which party came to power. In this context, conservative politics was close to Michael Oakeshott's conception. To be conservative, then, is to prepare a familiar to the unknown, to prefer the tried to the untried. While this may seem rational, it also worked within the historical context of the post-war Europe, stabilized by Marshall Plan, the one which afforded considerable social security to its citizens, if only countered the allure of communism emanating from the Soviet Union. However, with the spread of neoliberalism in the 1980s, as states were compelled to free the shackles of capital and undertakes austerity, this stability began to give way with the dissolution of the Soviet Union in the 1991. The threat of communism also receded, allowing capital even more freedom to evade taxation and decry welfarist measures as economic populism. For a while, things seemed to work. The rise of the Tony Blair Bill Clinton style of politics heralded the new age of globalization. However, with rising economic inequality came rising insecurity. This also meant the older consensus began to give way, as status quo liberal conservative politics no longer offered any solutions. Thus, neo-nationalist parties with extreme right-wing agendas began to gain a subaltern popularity. Today, they can no longer be seen as fringe players. What characterizes these parties is a mix of contrarian positions challenging the status quo. For instance, Melanie criticizes France for its neo-colonial policies in Africa, but it has been quoted praising Mussolini. Similarly, Trump's muted position on the H-1B contradicts his anti-globalization, pro-working class rhetoric. This is coupled with a class of politics of revisionism, heralding national golden ages, whether it is MAGA or MIGA. The lack of coherence is India intentional. The aim is to provide a channel for people's resentment against conventional politics. It also points to a deeper structural malaise that status quo politics cannot transcend. It is now a project that has been exhausted by the very creature that it birthed neoliberal capitalism, whether it is in the US, UK, or Germany, people have been profoundly dissatisfied with the political opposition they have on the table. The shaking up of conventional domestic politics also reverberates at the global level, and thus the breakdown of the transatlantic consensus has its root in the withering efficacy of normal politics in these countries. As these societies transform, the liberal international order may be witnessing an irreversible structural decline. But does this also mean that there will be a new global alliance of the right? No, not quite. The fundamental difference is that right wing politics does not have a universal vision For the nation state is the highest form of political unity that they aspire to. Thus, unlike a liberal politics which imagines a global village of liberal democracies and free markets of Marxism, which believes in international solidarity between workers, right-wing movements can at best have tactical alliances with each other. Any kind of closer material solidarity goes against the very fabric of their politics, which is predicated on an irreducible difference between the self and the other. At the same time, what we might see is a different kind of world where the logic of power reigns supreme under the spheres of influence in the absence of any other universal ethical vision of an international order. The world may thus be looking at a protracted period of parallel orders or disorders. While this may seem bleak, there is an opportunity to radically reimagine politics and conceive a new universalism. Let's see who takes it. In place of the post-Second World Order, Mr. Trump envisages a world where alliances are more than empty words and great powers bluff and bully their way through. Securing the new oil, India must open up exploration of critical minerals to protect its interests. A resolution of the Russia Ukraine war seems imminent. The contours of the peace may depend on Vladimir Zelensky's final offer to the American access of his country's considerable critical mineral resources. Not long ago, America's involvement in foreign wars or conflicts centered around geoeconomics of oil, the technologies of the future, electric vehicles, renewable energy, high tech semiconductors, all are critical mineral intensive. Critical minerals, copper, lithium, cobalt, graphite, nickel, rare earth, among others, are the new oil, but with great influence on not just economic but over war and peace. India must take note. In the second half of the 20th century, America's involvement in the foreign conflicts and wars was influenced partly by ideology but by geo-economic interest, particularly oil. Think think back to the first Gulf War. At that time, the US was import dependent for oil. Since then, US left no stone unturned to become self-sufficient in oil and gas, becoming the second largest producer in the world. Import dependence on something as fundamental as oil is a strategic vulnerability. The reason why Vladimir Putin's Russia can fight protracted wars despite a middling economy is its self sufficiency in oil and defense equipment, but without the former, having the latter would not be enough. Abundant, affordable fuel is necessary to run the war machinery. Putin also knows that Europe's import dependence on energy, particularly gas, is what what makes its response to Russia's moves more complicated. For the US, a present scenario around critical minerals is not dissimilar to the saturation of oil 3 decades ago. It may be more acute. The US is heavily import dependent. Worse, the greatest concentration of many critical minerals, particularly rare earths, is in the hands of the greatest rival, China. Imagine the Cold War if the USSR had control over much of the world oil. President Donald Trump's interest in acquiring the Greenland or suggestion to make Canada the 51st state of the US is driven by a huge potential these lands have in critical minerals. Ukraine is also well endowed. It has one third of the estimated lithium reserves in all of Europe. Its reserves of graphite, a key input in batteries, and are among the top 5 in the world. It has significant reserves of 17 rare earths, in which China controls about 75% of the global deposits. The reason why Putin Russia can fight protected wars despite middling economy is its self-sufficiency in oil and gas and defense equipment. But without the former, Having the latter would not be enough. Abundant, affordable fuel is necessary to run the war machinery. Putin also knows that Europe's import dependence on energy, particularly gas, is what makes its response to Russia's moves more complicated. For the US, the present scenario around critical minerals is not dissimilar to the situation of oil 3 decades ago. It may be more acute. US is heavily import dependent. Worse, the greatest concentration of critical minerals, particularly, is in the hands of its greatest rival, China. Imagine if the Cold War, if the USSR has control over much of the world's oil. President Donald Trump's interest in acquiring Greenland, a suggestion to make Canada the 51st state, is driven by huge potential on these lands having critical minerals. Ukraine is also well endowed. It has one third of the estimated lithium reserves in all Europe. Its reserves of graphite, key input in batteries, among top 5 in the world, and it has significant reserves of 17 rare earth, which China controls about 75% of global deposits. The US is locked in a tight race with China on the technological frontier. Overall, one would assume that US is ahead, but China's dominance of the global electric vehicle industry. The US only has Tesla in the top league of EVs. Its catch up with AI in DeepSeek, its inability to manufacture cutting edge military hardware, including sixth generation fighter jets, suggests that US leadership isn't as certain or secure as it may have been a decade ago. The last thing US would want in such scenario is to be vulnerable in the supply chain for raw materials which underlie many of these technologies. For now, the US may not achieve self-sufficiency, but it will want to ensure zero dependence on China or any other country that is friendly to US interests. Therefore, Ukraine's resources are important, and the war gives the US more leverage with Ukraine that it has with Greenland or Canada. There are lessons for India. India may not be at the same league as the US and China in terms of technology and cutting edge manufacturing. It may not feel the pressure on critical minerals because a lot of things, including batteries and components of solar and wind power, infrastructure are imported today. But the government aspires to make India a manufacturing hub, and all of these should be made in India soon. India's import dependence for critical minerals is even more on oil. The government is actively searching for assets overseas and signing supply agreements with friendly countries. However, there is no substitute for producing more domestically. India has very rich geology, but there is insufficient exploration. It's time to completely liberalize exploration and let those who make discoveries monetize their find. This is a global practice. This is a path to vulnerability free future. Dubai to Malwan. As passerby overhears a teen's post-match remark, his family is arrested, shop bulldozed. This is how to thumb your nose at court. Passerby who claimed he overheard slogans that he considered anti-national from a home in Malwan, a town in Maharashtra's in Durg district. Even as India played Pakistan for the Champions Trophy in Dubai Stadium, that's all it took, apparently, to unleash a set of events that should be deeply embarrassing for a state where a new government has just taken charge after winning a large hearted mandate, and a society that is proud of its progressive traditions and home to Mumbai, one of India's most capa- capacious and modern cities. On Sunday, a 15-year-old boy who allegedly raised the slogans was sent to an observation home and his parents arrested after confrontation with neighbors under charges such as promoting enmity between groups on grounds of religion. On Monday, a motorcycle rally was taken out in Malwan not to protest against the bizarre detention, but to demand stricter action against the member of deceased family. On Monday too, the Malwan MLC demolished the family's scrap shop, holding up the fig leaf of illegality. What happened in Malwan violates fundamental freedom, the rule of law, and the constitutional letter of spirit. That the teenagers' slogan should be seen as a threat to nation, that the police should hasten to file an FIR, make charges on flimsy grounds, and the MLC should trust to perpetrate bulldozer injustice is deeply troubling. This also thumbs a nose at the Supreme Court itself, which has laid down pan India guidelines to prevent this brazen misabuse of power and miscarriage of justice. In November last year, court framed guidelines to ensure that due process is followed before properties of citizens are demolished. Violation of the guidelines would be deemed unconstitutional and amount to contempt of court. The India-Pakistan encounter in Dubai, which sparked the dismal sequence of events in Malwan, also leave behind a memory of another kind, a viral photograph captured moment that framed the spirit of the game. It showed former Indian captain Kohli bending to tie the shoelaces of Pakistani player Naseem Shah, who was at the non-striker end. If the Dubai moment was about confidence and grace, Malwan is anything but. It is up to the state and the court to correct the course. Dear Mr. Musk, in the spirit of accountability you demand from US federal employees, here are five things newsrooms have to deal with. Your demand from US federal employees to list five activities that they undertook during the week. Refusal will result in termination. You will have threatened has struck a chord. Given that you are a global figure, many journalists follow your moves. Once, it was a pleasure to see you enjoy cherished moments with eggs at your Oval Office. Apart from wondering which appellation inspired the other, it was delightful to see the champions of workaholism for others enjoying a break in the middle of the workday. To ask questions of war and peace, future of the West and Ukraine and Palestine hang in the balance. Your friend, the president, enjoyed a much needed chuckle over the phonics of French with Macron. French is the most beautiful language. I have no idea what he said he he's saying, but the elegant, beautiful language. Deep, then not, then to disappoint you by being productive during the commute to work. Members of the newsroom watched videos of you wielding a chainsaw. After all, as jobs became more precarious, what's more inspiring than a joke at the expense of people's livelihood? For number four, a look at your X feed. Envy, it must be confessed, followed. Few unproductive workers would have time to watch conspiracy theory videos and post and reply to comments several times daily. Finally, the possibility of a hyper fast train New York to London in 54 minutes from one of your companies promised to make travel time a thing of the past. Perhaps Borivali to Churchgate in 2 minutes. Unfortunately, we are still waiting for the self-driving car. 1 week and five things later, Mr. Musk, a request. Please spare us this task going forward. Following your whirlwind life, it turns out, is lot of fluff and little substance. Making this list is ultimate lack of productivity. The time for seeking global solutions is running out. Prof. Francis. The quality of teaching, and that's the issue to be debated, not adoption of three-language formula. Tamil Nadu's refusal to adopt three-language formula has irked the center. A two-language policy has been placed in Tamil Nadu for decades. In the post-independence history of our education, language has consistently remained a controversial issue. One reason is that language has been perceived mainly as a medium of instruction rather than as a means to think and express oneself during childhood. Not just word medium, but the another word in that phrase, instruction. It is also interesting and loaded with history. that of colonial days when education was believed to consist of instruction alone, the idea that children learn better when they feel relaxed emerged well after the mid 20th century, influenced educations in European countries. Of course, that is not the whole story of language problem. Until quite recently, policy circles in education were acutely aware of the history of this problem. After independence, language was perceived as a key factor to be addressed for goal of national integration. In fact, the history of this perception goes further back. As independence came closer, the issue was charged with contentions and claim. If India is to have a national language, which one will it be? Question was debated in the Constituent Assembly. Related questions was that official language of the Union government. Neither of the two questions proved simple or easy to resolve. There were no obvious answers, although many leaders of the freedom movement had thought that there were. Their attempt to build a consensus was fraught with issues simmering with language they had assured to be the answer to India's quest for national language. Like any other language, Hindi had more than one variety, and struggle with its political literary world was quite intense, if not bitter. No arena was more active than education for a debate over language. Debates in early decades typically focused on national integration, pedagogy, appropriateness, and egalitarian goals of constitution. For this, the dominance of English medium private schools was a considerable factor. Although their number was quite small at the time, many eminent politicians of the North had anticipated a gradual decline of the status of English. All sides saw language as a medium, and so did policymakers and teacher trainers. The reality did not change even as the political struggle over language proved divisive and detrimental to children's interest. The equilibrium was rather tender and also ineffective. It was maintained under the three language formula, an early intervention that carried out the approval of Central Advisory Board of Education. This remarkable forum has served India since the 1920s to resolve many difficult debates around concerning the practice of federal governance in education. This forum has been in disuse over the recent past and the consequences are now surfacing. Let us remember that CAB was the only formal instrument available for building consensus and keeping everybody in touch with what was happening in education. Reading the archival record of CAB debates is like absorbing the history of our education system of education. Solutions that CAB offered was not mandatory. In the context of language education, the real impasse was not over this or that formula but over standards. While science and mathematics have been engrossed by coaching institutions, no one bothers about standards of language teaching. Many states now made the teaching of English compulsory from the beginning of the government schools in the government schools, but that has made little difference to the standard of teaching and children's ability to use it. Teachers' own command over English is quite often limited. Even in Andhra Pradesh, where radical move has been made to make English as a medium of instruction. In the old days, Hyderabad-based Institute for English had resources to work with teachers of state school all over the country. It is a pleasant memory now. What is flourishing everywhere is a business of low-budget private schools who impress poorest parents by claiming to be fully English medium. Not just English, the standards of teaching Hindi are no better. Indeed, Hindi is a special victim of the convention that forces it to serve as a cultural preserver rather than as a means of learning different subjects with pleasure and satisfaction. Indeed, several other Indian languages share its fate in their respective states. The long term benefits of learning a language well are also declining. One major indicator of this is the decline in reading habits. Reading is taught from the earliest grades, but schools fail to produce habitual readers. Climate of hostility in the weak face of US veto, IPCC can draw inspiration from its seminal work during Trump's first presidency despite constraints. Scientists from more than 190 countries are meeting in Hangzhou, China this week as part of the process of drafting the IPCC's seventh assessment report. Absent from the conference are experts from the US, including NASA chief scientist Catherine Calvin, who was slated to chair one of the main sessions. The delegates' participation was reportedly vetoed by the Trump's administration. The seventh assessment report is due only in 2029. However, the UN body that evaluates the science behind climate change often staggers the release of its findings. There was hope, therefore, that some of its findings would be published before 2028, where the UNFCCC conducts its next global climate stocktake, the agreement of assessment of collective progress made towards achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement. The US withdrawal could jeopardize the chances of IPCC's inputs informing the stocktake. The US has not clarified whether it is withdrawing from the IPCC. However, by pulling out experts from the Hangzhou meet, Trump administration made apparent its hostility to the UN body. Trump has ordered federal scientists at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and US Global Change Program to stop on IPCC projects. There are fears that these moves could be a precursor to cutting off US funds to the agency. The apprehensions are not unfounded, given that IPCC was starved of American financial support during Trump's first stint. The Joe Biden administration, in contrast, provided close to a quarter of agency's funding. Fretters have now been put to technical team assembled by the former US president to assist American experts on the IPCC panel. So that said, first Trump administration's disengagement with the IPCC did not derail the agency. A large part of the work on the sixth assessment report was conducted during the challenging period, enabled to a great extent by support from countries and institutions outside the US. The Hangzhou meeting could be a precursor for putting in place procedures to fill the void created by US's absence. Hangzhou, China, this week as part of the process of drafting the IPCC's seventh assessment report. Rajasthan sexual exploitation charges put down on edge. Governor joins Dharma call. NAAC removes 900 assessors, many dismissed after CBI arrest in bribery case. Enforce exemplary penalties to end Pradhan culture in Gram Panchayats panel constituted by the Ministry of Panchayati Raj has recommended exemplary penalties for proven cases of proxy leadership as a measure to curb the practice of Pradhan Mantri, Sarpanchpati or Mukhyapati. Gender exclusive quotas in some panchayat subject committees and ward committees like Kerala, appointing women as ombudsmen, public spherings of women pradhans in some gram sabhas, create federation of women panchayat leaders setting gender resource centers, and accountability and oversight mechanisms which include helplines and women watchdog committees for confidential complaints about proxy leadership. Prayagraj Mahakumbh ends, government says over 1.53 crore devotees took holy dip on the last day. With a massive gathering of more than 1.53 crore pilgrims on Wednesday, Mahakumbh, which began on January 13, came to a close. Anticipating large crowds, government implemented comprehensive measures to ensure smooth conduct. With over 1 crore pilgrims, the total footfall reached 66.3 crore, making successful conclusion of one of the world's largest religious gatherings. On the last bathing day, crowds began gathering at Sangam from midnight. By early morning, the air resonated with the sacred chants as devotees from various places arrived. Mahashivratri is an important festival for Hindus as it celebrates the divine marriage of Lord Shiva and Goddess Parvati. However, it's more special during Mahakumbh to ensure security. The police and Kumbh administration restricted vehicles into the Kumbh area and suspended VIPs pilgrim, pilgrimage. 26 year over 41 lakh pilgrims arrived in the Kumbh area by 6 am. As the day progressed, the numbers crossed. This time, expecting an even larger crowd for the final holy day, the government deployed senior IPS officers to oversee security and ensure smooth execution of plans. Large police force was deployed in Prayagraj to manage the Mahakumbh. During the 45-day event, the festival attracted pilgrims from Nepal and Pakistan. Mahakumbh also saw several accidents involving visitors traveling or returning from religious fairs. Stampede on January 29 during Mani Amavasya, which government reported 30 deaths. The 26-year-old women raped inside bus at Pune's Swargate Depot Police. Telangana tunnel collapse. Sri Salem Left Bank Canal project where portion of tunnel ceiling collapsed on February. Mamta extends olive branch to doctors hike their salary. Opposition calls it bribe. A salary hike for junior doctors. Salary hikes ranging 15,000 for senior residents. Musk attends Trump cabinet meet as judges question secrecy of the Doge. Maldives passes bill to reduce number of Supreme Court judges, suspends three. Suspension shortly before hearing on action against MPs over defection. Terms of US mineral deal ready but no security guarantee. Kiev. Rise in Iran's stock of near weapons grade uranium. IAEA. Iran's stock of uranium close to weapons grade has jumped since it announced a dramatic acceleration in enrichment in December and has been no progress on resolving outstanding issues. Trump posts AI made video of redeveloped Trump Gaza draws severe backlash online. Washington Post opinion editor exits as Bezos stares pages in the new direction. Ahead of European Union delegation visit, focus on collaborative and cohesive collaborative approach. Proposed Delhi airport tariff hike to make airfares only marginally costlier, said Dial CEO. Ride app switch to subscription model amid conflicting rulings on GST liability. Uber has switched to cash only model for auto rickshaw rides, joining competitors Namayatri, Rapido, and Ola despite conflicting tax rulings. The authority of advanced ruling on whether ride aggregators must continue collecting GST from passengers. Indigo to add three more wide body aircraft on damp lease. Farmers' share in Rabi crop consumer prices ranged from 40 to 67%, RBI survey. In delimitation, no loss for South, fair share. A day after DMK leader, Tamil Nadu Chief Minister M.K. Stalin described the proposed delimitation exercise as a sword hanging over the head of South India, Union Home Minister Amit Shah said Wednesday that the southern states, including Tamil Nadu, will not lose a single parliamentary seat. Board exams over 1900 panic calls from students flood GHS SEB helpline. 32 countries, global money trials, FIRs on deportee statements. India to red flag carbon tax data privacy concerns. Trump offers $5 million gold card visas for US citizenship. Gold card visas for US citizenship. Beg to differ, says afforestation body after CAG flags irregularities. The report covers the period of 2019 to 21-22, flagging inadmissible expenditure made from total allocated funds of 753 crore for 43 forest divisions in the state. CAG report flagged instances of diversion and inadmissible expenditure, deficiency in accounting procedure, non-discharging of interest liability and violation of guidelines on unspent balance. Sectors under CBAM: iron ore concentrates, steel products, iron and steel, aluminium products. Lakpati Didi, Surat civic body to empower women. So that's all for today. See you in the next one.